broadcasting from the Community Service Radio Studio at the Pop Music Academy in Sellersburg, Indiana. Welcome to Dangerous Subversive Radio. Prepare to open your mind and question everything. So, we meet again. Welcome back to episode 6 of Dangerous Subversive Radio. I am your host, Tim Ritalik. And that man behind the curtain is master engineer and producer Jackie Smith.
Hi.
Without whom this show literally would not exist. Let's talk about Elizabeth Warren. You know her. Yeah. Everybody's favorite Native American. Just a couple of highlights of her career. Well, she certainly jumped on that "you didn't build that" bandwagon and tell every American entrepreneur that their success has nothing to do with their hard work. It was all given to them by someone else. As a matter of fact, she pretty much seized the reins and started driving the damn thing. She advocates for free college tuition and then charges $340,000 a year to teach one course at Harvard. But the thing that aggravates most conservatives is that she claims to be a Native American. On what basis does she make that claim? Well, evidently there's a portrait of her grandfather hanging in her house. And in this portrait, her grandfather has rather high cheekbones. So, of course, that makes Elizabeth Warren a Native American, right? Well, the success of this show, the reason for our ever-growing audience, is one thing, and that's people clicking on this show every week to hear me say something that you never, ever expected to hear. Well, here it comes. Elizabeth Warren is a Native American. Why? Because she was born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. You see, the definition of a native is the dictionary definition of a native is a person born in a specified place or associated with a specified place by birth, whether subsequently resident there or not. Now you see, that last part is what allows me to say that I am a native of Colorado, a native Coloradoan. I left there in 1995. Since then, my various and sundry careers have taken me to Indiana, Kentucky, Arkansas, and a couple other places. Actually, Nantucket Island, which, of course, makes me a temporarily displaced Coloradoan. But we digress. So when I was born in Denver, Colorado, Denver, Colorado is in America. So, when people ask me what I think of Native American issues, I tell them, well, of course, being a Native American myself, I'm very interested in them.
Hey, you can't say that.
Can't say what? That I am a Native American?
Yeah, you can't say that.
I believe I just did.
I think you did.
Yes. You see, but isn't that cultural appropriation?
Oh, yeah. You can't just take away what they are.
I'm not taking anything away from anyone. I'm simply using the term properly to refer to everyone to whom it applies.
You're an immigrant, though.
Well,
we're a nation of immigrants.
Yeah, not so much.
Okay.
You see, the definition of an immigrant is a person who comes to a country to take up permanent residence. I didn't come to this country. I was born here. As a matter of fact, 83% of the people in this country were born here. We are actually mostly a nation of Native Americans, just as France is mostly a country of Native Frenchmen for the time being. Just as England is mostly a country of Native Englishmen for the time being. I have to say that because unless some things change very drastically, the day is coming when that will no longer be true. You and I, unless things change, we will see the day when England no longer belongs to the English and France no longer belongs to the French. Now, if you consider anyone whose ancestors, no matter how distant, came from someplace else, then yes, we are a nation of immigrants, including almost all Aboriginal Americans, every one of whose ancestors immigrated from Siberia. You see, that is the correct word. Aboriginal Americans. Ab, it's either Latin or Greek for from, and original referring to the origin. From the origin, Aboriginal. And not only is it linguistically correct, but no one can culturally appropriate it, at least not believably, from the Aboriginal Americans. So you see, I'm not taking anything away here. I'm giving them the word that no one can hijack from them. You see, this is a perfect example of us getting bent out of shape over the wrong problem. We were all getting bent out of shape over Elizabeth Warren lying about her ethnicity, when what we should have been getting bent out of shape about is that our language has been hijacked. Now, why do they insist on calling these people, Aboriginal Americans, Native Americans? Well, it's because it lends an air of legitimacy to them that you and I, as immigrants, can never have. Even though they'll tell you in the same breath that all immigrants are just as good as the native people, just as good as the rest of us. But, it turns out that that is actually only a certain kind of immigrant. And we'll get to them later.
But they are more legitimate. We took their land, right?
Well, let's take a look at that. This is a picture of the Ainu people. Have you ever heard of them? I'm not surprised.
I never knew.
No, good-looking people, though, huh? Well, it turns out that, let me ask you one question. Do they look Japanese? No, not really. But in fact, the Ainu people are the Aboriginal people of Japan. The people that we think of as the Japanese actually started immigrating from Korea around the year 300 BC. And they have been displacing and marginalizing the Ainu ever since. Have you ever heard of the Pelasgians? Well, I didn't think so either. The Pelasgians were the Aboriginal people of the area around the Aegean Sea. And they were pushed out and displaced by the Hellenic people that we know as the Greeks. So, how about Hawaii? Yeah, how about Hawaii? There are now more ethnic Japanese in Hawaii than native Hawaiians. How about Neanderthals? The Neanderthals were the Aboriginal people of Europe. And then they got pushed out and displaced by the Cro-Magnon people who immigrated up from Africa. Is all this stuff right? Arguably not. But nor is it uniquely American. The point is, find me a single country on the globe that is still occupied solely by its original inhabitants. Hint, you can't. That's how ubiquitous this phenomenon is. Now, meanwhile, back in America, I recently saw a movie by a man named Dinesh D'Souza, in which a Lakota woman was lamenting the coming of the white man, wished we'd never come here because we took the Black Hills from the Lakota. And in all decency, the Black Hills should be given back to the Lakota. Well, if that happened, if we did give the Black Hills back to the Lakota, if everything's going to be really fair, they would have to give the Black Hills back to the Cheyenne because they took the Black Hills from them. So if we gave the Black Hills back to the Lakota, and just to be fair, they gave it back to the Cheyenne, then to be completely fair, the Cheyenne would have to give it back to the Kiowa because they took the Black Hills from them. So you see, it's not always so cut and dried with the bad guys over there and the good guys over here, as you may have been led to believe. Now, if we were to sit here and discuss every single word in our language that's been hijacked, we would be here half the night. And eventually, I'm going to have to go to the bathroom, okay? So we're just going to take a look at a few of the more interesting ones. Remember when I said that the ethnic Japanese immigrated from Korea about 300 BC? Well, turns out we're not supposed to say BC anymore. Okay. BC, of course, stands for before Christ. And the other side, at AD, stands for Anno Domini, which is Latin for in the year of our Lord. Okay. But we're actually supposed to say BCE, before Common Era. Although I'll give them this, that this is not very strictly enforced. So it turns out that before the Common Era, eras were really common to people. Evidently, people were living in different eras at the same time. And then at the beginning of the Common Era, all the timelines synced up, and now we're in a Common Era. Sounds like some pretty good science fiction to me, but let me ask you this. I say 300 BC. You say 300 BCE. Now, is 300 BCE denoting a different year than BC? No. So they are denoting the same year, so one is just as correct as the other. So why the change? Well, of course, because it refers to Christ, and that is he is the Christian Savior. Okay, and we cannot have any special accommodations for Christians. We can have special accommodations for Jews, and special accommodations for Buddhists, and special accommodations for Hindus, and Lord knows we have special accommodations for Muslims. But we can't have any for Christians, even though 83% of the people in this country identify themselves as Christians. So it is perfectly correct, actually, to say that we are a nation of Native American Christians. How many people is that going to get their blood boiling? Okay, next word, phobia. Phobia. Last week, we talked about why some people embrace conservatism with all of its xenophobia and homophobia and Islamophobia. Well, let's look first at the definition of the word phobia, which is, of course, an extreme or irrational fear. A good example is arachnophobia. And I can speak about this with some modicum of authority because I myself have arachnophobia. When I was a child, it was paralyzing. It was debilitating. Over the years, I've mostly gotten basically under control. Of course, big spiders, forget it. I am going to get a t-shirt that says in great big letters, "Spiders must die." Except for jumping spiders. They're cute. Okay? So that's a classic phobia. Let's look at some of the ones that have come along more recently. Xenophobia. Xenophobia is an intense or irrational dislike or fear of people from other countries. Well, let me tell you, depending on the foreigner, the person from the foreign country, this may not be so irrational these days. But that's another discussion, and we're going to have that discussion in the near future. Okay. Homophobia. Homophobia is now defined as an intense dislike or prejudice against homosexual people. So, but they still call it a phobia. So let me tell you, people who have homophobia, are they actually afraid of homosexuals? Well, actually some of them are. They are afraid that homosexuals are going to hit on them, that they're going to accost them, that they're going to molest them. For those people, I just got one question. Do you really think you're all that in a bag of chips? Also, gay people want someone who's going to reciprocate their feelings, and that's not you, is it? There's really only one place you really have to worry about being accosted by a homosexual. Prison. Okay? Stay out of prison and you'll be okay. Trust me on this one. Okay, and here's the big one. Islamophobia. Islamophobia is defined as a dislike of or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as a political force. Now, here's the interesting thing about these two newest phobias. Homophobia and Islamophobia. In these two words, homo and Islamo are the prefixes. The root of the word is phobia, an irrational fear. And yet you'll notice that an irrational fear has been taken out of these two definitions. Now, let me ask you this. Do you really think that's just an oversight on somebody's part? Or could it be that to leave the root of the word in the definition would weaken the new definition of the word and harm the extent to which it serves a political agenda? Think about that. What we're talking about here is manipulating language for political purposes. Do you know what that's called? That's called propaganda. And that is what Joseph Goebbels did for Adolf Hitler. Well, remember when I said earlier that it's only a certain kind of immigrant that now has special status in America? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? You can see it coming. Undocumented immigrants. Now, these are the people we used to call illegal aliens, right? But now they're undocumented immigrants. Well, let me tell you this. If you get into a dictionary and look up the word alien, it does not mean a little green man from another planet. The dictionary definition of alien is a foreigner, especially one who is not a naturalized citizen of the country in which they are living. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the moral ins and outs of whether they should come here or not, and the reason for that is this. If I were a Mexican standing in Mexico looking across the border to the United States, and I knew that as long as I stay on this side of that border, my life is going to suck. And my family's lives are going to suck because my country has not done the things and taken the actions that can allow me to prosper in my life. And if I know that if I go to that side of that border, my life's going to be better. My family's lives are going to be better. And if I know that to do that legally is going to take 10 or 15 years, I can't say with absolute certainty that I wouldn't do the exact same thing. But if I did, when I get to that other side, am I going to be entitled to be protected from my crossing the border illegally? Am I going to be entitled to benefits that the people of the United States don't even get, like free medical care? Well, yeah, I don't think I would. So I will go into one of the moral arguments against illegal immigration, and that is anchor babies. You know what these are? It's when pregnant Mexican women come across the border and make sure they give birth to their children here, so that those children, by virtue of being born in the United States, will have United States citizenship. And before you get any wrong ideas about this, I love Mexican culture. I love everything about it. I love their music. I love their architecture. I love their art. I love their fashion. And God knows I love their food. Okay, so this is not anything about being against Mexicans. But the anchor baby issue is where we are, it's about the barbaric cruelty of tearing families apart with deportation. Somehow, somebody got the idea that if parents are deported back to Mexico, their American citizen children have to stay here. Okay? Every single year, babies are born to American servicemen and servicewomen in foreign countries where they are stationed. Okay? Now, when their deployment is up and they get ready to come back to the United States, do you think any one of those governments of the countries they're stationed in say, not so fast? That baby belongs to us. It stays here. Do you think the American government says, hey, we're not taking that kid. They weren't born here. Nonsense. If you are born to two American parents, you are automatically an American citizen, no matter where you were born. Well, the same thing applies in Mexico. If your parents are Mexican, then you are a Mexican citizen, whether or not you were born in the United States. So, if Mexican parents are deported back to Mexico, their Mexican children can go with them. So enough about that already, okay? Look at it this way. Every one of these illegal aliens has a family back in Mexico, right? Weren't they splitting up their own families when they came here? Okay? And if you're going to make the argument that people have to stay in the country in which they're born, you know where I'm going with this, right? Okay, if you're going to make the argument that people have to stay in the country where they're born, then doesn't that mean the Mexicans have to stay in Mexico? Okay. My point is these people are not refugees. They're not fleeing countries that have been devastated by famines or wars. They have a country. Their country is Mexico. If their well-being and their prosperity is the responsibility of any government, it is the Mexican government, not ours. Okay? The fact that the Mexican government has pretty much made sure their lives are going to suck is not our fault. And fixing it is not our responsibility. Now, you can say, what about the people who really are refugees? Who really are fleeing countries that have been devastated by wars and famines? Don't we have to take them? Well, I find it very curious that the countries in their region of the world, the countries that share their culture, don't feel the least bit obligated to take in any of them. As a matter of fact, what makes a country? I think Michael Savage put it best when he said, language, borders, culture. If you take a culture and dilute it to the point where it is no more prevalent than a dozen other cultures in your country, if you throw open the borders and say anyone can come in at any time, in any numbers, you no longer have a country. You have a no man's land. So yes, we are taking in these refugees. And when we take them in, we are doing this out of the goodness of our hearts. Because we Americans have good and kind hearts. That is part of our American culture. And our American culture, no one would go into any of these people's countries and declare their culture illegitimate and therefore forfeit. Well, our culture, our American culture, has every bit as much right to exist as theirs. So we are taking in these refugees. We are doing it out of the kindness of our hearts. And with that in mind, let me ask you a few questions. How many hoops should we have to jump through to accommodate them? How much should our lives be required to change so that their lives don't have to? I submit to you now that it is not one single bit. This country comes with an instruction manual. It is the Constitution. Nowhere in that document does it grant foreigners the right to enter our country in any other way than through our immigration laws. We do not owe anyone access to our country. So yes, we're taking them in. But when we do it, we are not fulfilling an obligation. We are not atoning for some transgression. We are allowing them to seek refuge in our country. We owe them nothing. If they are going to come to this country and settle here and enjoy all the blessings that this country bestows upon them, they owe us. They owe us their allegiance and their assimilation. Well, we'd like to start giving you some ways that you can share this program. If you're viewing it on YouTube, you can find the little share symbol. It's an arrow, a curved arrow right on the screen. I tried to find an example of it to put up here. Couldn't find one. Click on that little arrow and it'll give you several ways to share it. You can share it by email. You can share it to Facebook and several other sources that I didn't actually happen to nail down what they were. You can find us on Jackie Smith's blog. How do they get to your blog, Jackie?
All they have to do is go to commsr.com.
commsr.com.
And that's the blog.
And that'll have links in there to these. If you're watching it on YouTube, of course, you can subscribe. That'll be to Jackie Smith's channel. And once you subscribe, you'll have access not only to all of Dangerous Subversive Radio, but past episodes of Community Service Radio.
An awesome show.
Awesome show, and we miss our good friend Russell Martin. We hope that the three of us can start that program up again very soon.
Yeah, Russ, you're listening to this?
Yeah. Of course, you can find me on Facebook. My name's Tim Ritalik. You can find the spelling of it right there on this book. So all you got to do is buy a copy of this book, and then you'll always know how to spell my name. And I mean, really, unless you're some kind of rabid right-winger, we all have some liberal friends. And we do occasionally get into conversations with them. And occasionally, those conversations drift into politics. Wouldn't you like to have some fresh tools in your toolbox the next time you have a conversation with them? Wouldn't you like to have arguments that persuade them and don't insult them?
This is that book.
Yes. Arguments that are so clear and so logical that if done properly, no can defend. Okay. Well, I've spent 10 years putting together those arguments, and you'll find them all in this book, Dangerous Subversive Heresies, available on Amazon.com. Okay. Well, that's going to wrap it up for show number 6. Ran a little short, but we will make that up next time. And I hope you come back next time. I hope you bring some friends. I hope you grow to be 100 million strong. But right now, I hope you have a good night.